shit, you know what I mean? Whereas like here, I'm like, I think psychologically something about being in a cave makes you just willing to kind of like, you found a good place. Just chill here for a second. There's no rush.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great place to wait.
Yeah.
I've just been listening to this Andrew Huberman podcast, and it's been making me see or imagine a lot of, like, pay attention to how I respond to different environments.
Yeah.
Because he's been talking about, like I was just telling you a second ago, he's been talking about how much the visual field influences your motivations and emotions and your thought processes. Like, for example, like fixating on a point for like 60 seconds will bring your level of focus up. Fuck. I wonder if you can hear that on the camera. The golf announcements.
She's literally saying threesome and foursome.
Dude, I know. That's a funny
mistake of my hearing.
No, it is. It's like a thing in golf that like it's like
Alright.
hello? Yes, I'd like to. Do you want to meet at the range for a?
I came for the foursome.
Do you think we can make a foursome today? Absolutely. I'll meet you down at the club. Yeah, that word has really been monopolized. They need to. Well, maybe honestly, I think at this point, they probably enjoy the fact that their words like threesome and foursome is associated with not golf. I think that
makes them feel relevant.
They have a good chuckle. They have a good chuckle around before walking out onto the golf course. I don't know. I don't know what boomers' sex lives are like. I really don't, to the truth. I feel like, I mean, there was the hippies, obviously, but I feel like that doesn't represent most boomers. I feel like boomers' sex lives must center around like some kind of different transcendental ideas than like younger people's. I don't know if it's like, maybe it's like gym equipment or like what it is exactly, but based on being a kid and growing up and seeing all the TV commercials, I feel like boomer sexuality is much more like performance oriented or something.
Sure.
Where it's like twice a week, 6 weeks, the best shape of your life. Buy this at Bowflex, and it's just like a guy just like pumping, and then like at the end of the commercial, his wife comes up to him and is like, "I guess we can have sex again. It's been 3 months." And then like you put in the work and you paid the money and you got the job. And, so I feel like that's what boomer sexuality is it's like not all bad. I feel like it's more like straightforward, actually, in some sense.
I don't know. I've always taken it for granted that most of their sex lives are very sad and non-existent, and
that doesn't sound exciting to you. That's the scenario I just painted out.
I think the minority makes something out of what they got the way you described, but I think a lot of them just they accept a cultural narrative of sex equals youth. And once they don't have youth anymore, they don't think sex can be had anymore.
They head out to the golf course.
Yeah. Why the fuck would you be, at a golf course when you have someone who apparently was sexy enough to devote your entire life to just at home? But you reap the patterns you sowed as a younger adult. Not to say that things can always change from day to day, but if you spend your youth thinking that life ends after 40, then you're gonna hit 40 eventually, and then you'll perform according to your own expectations.
I feel like you become 40 when you start thinking about the fact that you might be 40. I think that it's something that if you wait to just, if you wait until you actually feel old, I think you're going to get a lot farther before you feel old than if you start imagining it. And unconsciously winding yourself down so that you'll meet the point where you expect to be at a certain time. Like, you're like, if I'm going to be decrepit by the time I'm 40, then by the time you're 35, you're already like, oh, I'm getting there. It's, I mean, that's what, I mean, maybe there's something to your whole, like, living to 300 thing in there.
I don't know. I don't know how my experiment is going to go. I have way more power to do things than I've ever had before. I'm older than I've ever been before.
You're older than you've ever been before? Dude, me too.
Yeah. And I can do more and achieve more than I have ever been able to before.
Yeah.
Like the things that come, my waves of inspiration actually like find physical materialization now, which is new, and that makes you younger.
Yeah.
It brings more energy into your life, because the energy knows it can like, it knows that you're a good vessel to play host to it, because you will like put the energy into physical achievements, so you get more energy.
It's probably why the energy even came into your body at all.
I think a lot of people grow old by betraying their young goals. Like my goals are still to like make good on what I wanted to do when I was 16, 13, 18. Yeah. In that sense, I feel like my life's just beginning. Like it came into my mind that I could play music when I was 13 or 14 or 15, and I haven't gotten to a place of like personally knowing that I can and have made great music. I didn't get there till maybe like a couple months ago.
Really?
And I'm 33 now. So in that sense, that's like, okay, step one, like, can I do it? Yes, I can.
Yeah.
It took some time to get there, but now I can like start.
Yeah.
About the cave making you think slower, one of my, like the situation I'm in now is of having so much to do, and I have like a zillion things to do, so my fear is that I'm not able to really do any one thing as well as I want to, because there's so many different things from day to day to day to focus on. And but in terms of like a hypnotic suggestion, like optimizing your focus to leverage the present moment better in that Andrew Huberman podcast sense. I've been using a driving analogy. So I spent like 7 days playing this old 90s PlayStation driving game.
Sick.
And so it's all about drifting around corners. It's just the whole game is, can you like hit the drift at the right time and the speed and the right angle, and then like stomp on the gas again at the right moment to pull yourself out of the drift.
I like that. So like, the drifting as a metaphor for life is actually a pretty good one. Because you have to overextend a little bit if you're going to go fastest. Mm-hmm. But you can't overextend too much, because then you're going to fucking slide off the road.
Yes, you're
There's
like
a bit of risk.
The being in the zone on a racetrack or on a video game racetrack means like redlining your engine, ideally the entire time. But you can't control this 2-ton machine around corners unless you're going slow enough for your brain to do its synthesizing magic of like integrating all the moving pieces that it's subconsciously aware of into an instinctual sense of ease and control.
Yeah.
So I've been using that metaphor of when I feel overwhelmed, it's much more suggestion to slow down than to like make some drastic change to my lifestyle. It's much more about simply slowing down, and then a sense of spaciousness enters into my moment instead of a pressure, like overloaded, redlined thing. Like there's a sense of space around the different pieces of mental furniture.
Yeah, like that empty room we talked about.
And then my mind, with that sense of space, can spontaneously rearrange all my objectives and all my different ideas, and like my brain will start to like throw brand new ideas at me and like spurts of inspiration at me, because it like has enough space to do its synthesizing magic.
Yeah, I think when you feel like you have too much on your plate, you become less creative as a defense mechanism, so you don't keep. It's like a homeostatic negative feedback type situation where, like, if you get too hot, you'll start feeling lethargic, and you'll start feeling like you don't want to move more. You want to rest. Your body's telling you, like, stop doing the thing that's pushing you out of equilibrium. Maybe if if you feel psychologically overwhelmed, your unconscious is unwilling to dangle those tantalizing carrots of potential in front of you, so that you don't go after them again and again and again and drift off the track.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like that spaciousness thing you're talking about. It's making me think of looping back to that idea of I was making fun of you for saying you've never been older, but I thought about that a little more, and I was like, when is the oldest I've ever felt? And I can tell you it's definitely not now. If I had to say the oldest I've ever felt, it's probably when I was about 26.
Mm-hmm.
For kind of in the midst of that quarter life crisis type thing of having like all of the skills and desire but not having anything to do with it yet, not having that clear vision, and that was like the most useless I ever felt. Which I guess that feeling of uselessness is what I think of as age, because I've never actually chronologically been old, but I think mentally that was the time that I was closest to being able to really empathize with what old age is. It's just a feeling of drifting, like, well, because getting done with college is like the first death in some sense, culturally, because it's the point at which the cultural narrative goes like, this is the end of the line. You're on your own from here. I don't know, get a job or something. Like there's not like no one asks you like, so what's your major? I feel like in a lot of ways that the culture is going to be sort of well served by the collapse of institutional academia, because it'll just at least make the questions that like grandmas ask their kids forced to become more interesting,
more personalized. Yeah,
because like like once like Harvard University and all those Ivy League just completes, they complete their evolution into like an overpriced streaming service. Like once that transition is complete, and you can tell I feel very certain that's going to happen. I feel like it's just the momentum's in that direction. But once that occurs, it's going to have to be like, you have to ask kids like, what are your dreams? Like, what are you going to do? What do you want? What do you care about? Instead of like, what's your major? Communications, psychology, and then like.
Oh, I imagine that used to be a meaningful question that produced meaningful answers, but you can tell by the kinds of answers that are produced now, communications or project management. Like it's terms. The very names of the majors are terms of obfuscation to make it less clear what you're doing with your life.
It's like if there was a major called like, sort of like a yeah, like just like adulthood. And if you're enrolled in that, good for you. Then if you're not, then yeah, I mean, I'm
that
not,
would be the liberal arts education, is adulthood in the ideal sense. Liberal arts being
Right.
simply teaching you the classics and why they matter, the strongest philosophy that mankind has come up with so far and what its limits are, and how to form questions for yourself, majoring in adulthood. And now, obviously, liberal arts is a major in activism.
illiberal dogma.
Yes.
Yeah, it's it's like pretty much you can go to college and you can get a degree in institutional thought if you really want to. Just take any old course and don't think about it too much. And I think it's like a kind of like, I'm not sure if it's ever been true that it's been a really good idea to have institutions of adult purpose. I feel like that can only go wrong. Like,
Institutions of adult purpose, does that include like a factory?
I would say a factory is almost better in some sense because it's more honest, whereas like a college is also a factory, but it produces, it just produces institutional operators. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't, to the extent that a college, to the extent that a university is kind of goal-oriented, I think it's a good thing. Like, it's providing a means by which people can realize what they want to do. I think it's good, but like, to the extent that it's answering the question of, here's something to do for you, I can't really see that as a net positive, because it seems like if you don't know what you're going to do, you're only going to you're going to dig yourself deeper by seeking out someone who's going to offer that solution to you. Like, you have to figure out what you want to do and then seek out an institution that helps you do it. Like, if you are, for example, like if you really are interested in engineering, you better be studying that before you even get there.
Yeah.
Because if you're not the kind of person who's doing that, you're not going to succeed, or but you're going to get a degree and then end up making kind of just like a middling sort of life for yourself.
I would think that a healthy university would be dangerous. Mm-hmm. Have a certain element of risk to society. As a healthy, functioning university is
short-term risk, sure,
is producing individuals, and every like fully realized individual is infinite in what they can or might do. So that's very disruptive. So something like a bureaucratic government would like be suspicious and wary of healthy universities within its boundaries because of their inherently disruptive nature.
Well, we're gonna nip this shit in the bud.
Like, how disruptive would it be to like have these institutions all around the country that were isolating and highlighting the like Elon Muskism of every given group of kids? That'd be very disruptive to have more than one of those guys running around.
I don't know if you could really produce those kind of people. I think you could probably prevent people from wasting their talents.
You can keep them from wasting their talents by like honing them into an even finer blade of intelligence than they would have otherwise. Yeah.
I feel like school is going to have to evolve in such a way that it becomes, like, surprise, surprise, more decentralized. And it would be really cool if if you're going to keep some kind of publicly funded education, it should probably come with a lot more control over how that money is being spent on the part of the person who's actually benefiting from it. Like, I guess like the question of just like how to allocate funding is really unexamined. Like all the conversation about schools is, like you'll see this on like Reddit threads where people who don't know the answer to some societal quandary throw out, well, this is what happens when there's not enough money for education. Like that's like the naive, like fallback, I have no clue about how the world works take on why there's social issues.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a hint. It's not that there's not enough money for education. It's that it's not, if really the thing has anything to do with education at all, it's the fact that it's not allocated properly. Like,
and having no market incentive to compete is why it's not allocated properly.
And not having permission for people who have visions of how it could be allocated, not having permission for those people to actually try their vision. And that's why the weird schools of the world, like what are like those weird little alternative, like the crunchy hippie schools of the world, or you know how there's like these little things that are typically sort of like associated with kind of like alt people, like however, like I'm pretty sure you could take a kid and put them in like the Hogwarts Academy for witches and wizards, and like and it would be like the most ridiculous, not like just taking a kid and putting them in a weird environment is already giving them a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Because they're not because of anything weird that is there, but because of what all the ordinary, mundane, crushing pointlessness that isn't there.
Right. Totally.
And I feel like I somewhat benefited from that a little bit, based on the fact that my school was kind of like, it was like Bible camp turned into an elementary school, and so it was really dumb, and I spent a tremendous amount of hours memorizing Bible verses and stuff like that, and like, is that going to help me get a job? Not unless I'm a pastor. You know what I mean? So, but like, at the same time, like I could be doing something equally as pointless that, but was giving me like the illusion that somehow it would help. Like when I was a kid, like I knew that everything I was doing was useless.
Okay.
It was my whole childhood was just thinking, this is so stupid. You know what I mean? And I feel like that attitude almost was like a cold slap in the face from a little child of like, adults do not know anything.
Right.
And I internalized that attitude very early on when in the 4th grade I was being told by my science teacher that evolution was a lie.
Right.
And that like the dinosaurs and the human, like Adam and Eve were like riding around in the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Like it's possible, it's totally possible. Like that, I'm not even exaggerating. If you think I'm exaggerating, Google the Creation Museum. Google Ken Ham. Okay, no, it's fucking wild. The man's the genius at making money. What a boss.
Yeah, found a good niche.
Found a good niche. No. But it's in Kentucky. He literally made a theme park based on the young Earth creationist understanding of Genesis, and there's like dinosaurs with saddles.
That's definitely the best use of that myth, is to make a kid's
it's fantastic.
park.
It just makes me so proud of America that like you can do that. It's fucking amazing. And that like people are voluntarily allowed to spend their money to go there. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But I feel like just being inoculated with the idea that like that's like the silver lining of knowing that everyone doesn't really know, is that it's like, oh my God, what is reality? Reality must be fucking crazy if all these people who are way older than me have no idea.
Yeah.
And I still feel that way because I don't know what reality is. I feel like I've made like a little bit of progress, but I've honestly to come up with more questions than answers at this point, and it's just this divergent, forking, expansive view of things. But never once in my life have I ever even entertained the idea that anyone else knew what was going on. And that's probably one of my most centrally held beliefs, is that we're all pretty clueless about things.
Let's take a small break. But then we should talk about my World War III
Yeah,
prompt.
let's talk about that. That's good. I like that.
Yeah, well, before news cycles started literally using World War III terminology to talk about the Ukraine-Russia thing, we were using World War III as a more metaphysical event. That building on our idea that world wars of physical fighting become impossible, so then they level up to trade war. And after a certain point of globalization, trade war becomes impossible and it turns into information war.
Digital media war, yeah.
And one of the narratives, one of the lenses to put on this change of era that the human race is in right now is a world war type like conflagration or a worldwide revolution, something big enough that we wouldn't know day to day that we were inside of it. But after 8 years or 10 years or 15 years or so, like, we would be on the other side of it. And then we'd see that it had happened.
Yeah. So you want to find out specifically what are the stakes, what are the players?
As a mental game.
Right.
If we literally called this World War III, then what's the conflict about? Obviously, we're going to start by applying our own ideologies. So, centralized institutions.
How did you know I was going to say that? Yeah.
Versus decentralized protocols.
Yeah.
Is one lens to look at it with.
I think that's obviously my preferred lens, but I have an intuition that there's an even deeper lens that you could use to look at that. You could use. But what are your thoughts about this?
World War III, it certainly resonates as a symbol in the way I've talked about it before, where I think every generation periodically needs a worldwide objective event so that we have a new point of objectivity to refer to in the stories we tell to each other. I've said this a lot before, that our sense-making apparatus, individually and as groups, depends on World War II. Specifically in America, our sense-making depends on a logical, causal, linear storytelling that starts with World War II happened, and we won in these specific ways. So this and this and this and this happened, and that's why I'm here.
And that's been our experience, because that corresponds to like the window of living memory of the human lifespan too.
And so that point of sense-making is degrading to the point of nonsense now, because just no one's alive anymore who was actually there, so we're subconsciously creating a new worldwide objective event because we, as a race, instinctively know, we perceive things by telling stories, and we don't have an objective chapter one to start new stories from, so we're fumbling around trying to pick a new World War III level objective event so that we have a point of sense-making to start with again.
Yeah, and we had like this theory about how COVID, the humanity needed a reset psychologically, and so COVID was seized on as an opportunity to destroy the world. The Great Reset, so to speak. I think are you familiar with the Great Reset theories? There's like the basic outlines of it is that the World Economic Forum is the quote of like the council of like Sith lords, and that there's this one particular guy who wants to centralize everything under a global technocratic authoritarian government.
Yeah,
that's the idea.
The logic of this conspiracy theory being that it's just easier to control everybody if it's one nation, one oligarchy, instead of a bunch of divided nations that each have their own oligarchy.
And that like and that there's a push towards digital money and biometric global passport, population, controlling people's movement, controlling people's finances, kind of authoritarian globalism that's kind of wedded to this ideology of environmentalism and kind of using global warming as the apocalyptic event to sort of
use any narrative that's to hand to help corral a fearful populace into the type of control that would be easier for you as an oligarch. And so environmentalism is the next thing in line after COVID as an excuse. If you get people believing that apocalypse is imminent, then you have the perfect excuse to tell them to do whatever you want, because there's no level of justification that you can't reach if it's apocalypse.
I think it's pretty clear to me that the best way to absolutely guarantee that there will be environmental cataclysm on the Earth is to trust a centralized institution to try to avert it. So for me, it's kind of a moot point of whether or not we actually are headed for some type of environmental cataclysm in the near term, because I know that regardless of whether or not that's the case, trusting the trying to come up with a solution that involves like the environmental version of the World Health Organization is going to play out with predictable incompetence.
Well, in spirit, this was what the Bjorn guy was saying, in putting forth an argument that things were a lot more casual and handleable in terms of global warming than liberal media wants you to believe.
Yeah.
And his reasoning for that was that people are smart, and if you allow free, intelligent people to react to reality, then they can adjust to reality as the world environment changes, and very few people are actually going to die by their houses flooding. For example, they'll see the water coming and they'll make a decision to move.
Yeah, I know.
Things will happen slow enough that humans will be able to react fast enough. That'll be fine, unless you strip the ability of individuals to act in their own self-interest by giving all your power to a centralized government out of fear.
I actually personally didn't find him that convincing. I thought that his arguments about that were a bit kind of glossed over the idea that, like, regardless of whether or not humans will be able to adapt and survive, and not go extinct as a species, and maybe even cities will be okay because they'll be able to just like slowly recede. But I kind of didn't find it that convincing, because he glossed over the idea of just the value of protecting the biodiversity and the ecosystem for its own sake, regardless of how it impacts humans. I think that so I don't know if I feel like he's almost like a very flawed he's not doing a very good job articulating this skepticism toward global warming.
His whole Bjorn Stromberg, I think, or Lomberg, his whole thing, maybe the flaw was coming from the specificity of what he was specifically aiming to debunk, which was that we should focus on keeping the temperature from rising. And everything that's required and all the money that's required to specifically to keep the Earth's temperature from rising. That was the bulk of what he was aiming at.
Kind of ignoring everything else.
Ignore everything else to keep the temperature from rising.
Right.
So that was what all his arguments were geared towards, is it would cost this much money to do it. it's impossible to do it, and he tries to
Right.
demonstrate how it's physically impossible to keep the temperature from rising, and there's better ways to use that money.
It's analogous to the idea of kind of like how with COVID, like cases were fixated upon at the expense of everything else, and you saw how optimizing for only one single metric led to a disastrous result in terms of overall outcome of people's health. Yeah, I just didn't find. I felt like that in that interview that I watched with him, he came across as the Bjorn guy. He came across as very dismissive of the idea that there was environmental catastrophe occurring, and I understand why people want to probably go after him with pitchforks when he goes against that, because it seems like he's detracting urgency from the cause, whereas there's people whose main goal is to create urgency. And so it's like this battle of like everyone hates the guy who's going like, it's okay guys, when the ship is sinking. Like, you just want to throw that guy overboard. So I understand why people get pissed off at him, and I think that if he wants to be more effective, he needs to go out of his way to recognize that there is a critical aspect. There is a sort of I don't know, because like aside from global warming, like humans really are fucking the environment with mainly by polluting the environment with chemicals, polluting water supplies, and like overfishing ecosystems and things of that nature that don't have like a number attached to them that you can like watch on like a line chart. I think that like humans, particularly centralized institutions, tend to bias their strategies towards things that are measurable, like CO2 concentration, which is almost like you can put it on like a scoreboard, like it's like a ticker or it's like a stock or something. You can watch it instead of kind of admitting that you're just going to try your best and you can't. It's harder to measure how much of an impact you're having if you go after the things that have like the highest leverage, like for example, investing. Like I think if you're really serious about stopping global warming, you'd have a kind of Manhattan Project effort towards developing nuclear fusion. That's the only way out of it long term, is taking like, if you were really serious about solving climate, you would devote like $1 trillion to making it possible to generate as much energy as you could possibly need. Instead of trying to tell people to like not drive as much or something like that. It's just not going to work.
Anyway, back to World War III.
Yeah. I mean, this is World War III though. This is the myth of World War III that is standing there going like, informing our sense of how much life is going to go on.
It's mostly a narrative war. It's mostly an information war. Competing narratives, and the protagonist on the side of justice, in my mind, ideology comes in here, of course, is the individual learning how to make sense on their own terms. The individual learning how to navigate illusions toward truth is the protagonist here, and it's a method of learning how to tell who's telling the truth as they see it, learning how to see the truth itself apart from anyone talking about it.
It is true that this is a narrative war. I think that in World War II, obviously, there was also a narrative war. There was, totalitarianism versus free society, but it was this that was the narrative that kind of got papered over top of just the military conflict. But it feels like now the narrative is primary. The case in point being what I was saying a minute ago to you about how with the whole Russia and Ukraine situation, I do not know, I'm not able to form an opinion about that because I don't know where to find a source of trusted information about what is even happening. Mm-hmm. Like, isn't that a strange thing that in 2022, the biggest problem of war is convincing people that it's even happening, what is real, what is just, you know what I mean? Like, it's that really shows you how much the narrative and how much the media is standing in the first place and is the primary means by which.
So far, what I understand in the conflict to be true is that when the USSR dissolved, NATO, which was created to hem in the USSR, stayed there. And it would have been like an honorable move, maybe, to see that the Warsaw Pact dissolved and the USSR dissolved so NATO can dissolve. But NATO stayed there anyway to hem in Russian power. And there was a promise at that time to whoever the Russian leader was at the time that NATO, the countries in the NATO agreement would not expand eastward towards Russia.
Yeah.
The people in that agreement would not grow. And that is not true, and NATO has grown to include a lot more countries that are much closer to Russia's border now. So that's one factoid that I can reasonably know is true.
Sure. I have the same understanding. I guess the specifics of what's happening right now, of is Russia going to invade Ukraine or what is going to happen in the near term, is something that I look at the news headlines and I go, okay, so the only way to look at this is to try to understand what do they want me to believe, and then use that as a piece of evidence to try to infer what's actually happening.
They want you to believe that Russia is about to invade Ukraine.
Right, but why?
They want you to believe that, protecting Ukraine is justifiable and necessary.
I just wonder what's actually why is this occurring? Does this have something to do with COVID? Does this have something to do with the global economic situation, with the price of petroleum or something like that? I feel like there has to be some driver for why this is occurring at this moment. I feel like there's not I'm not just going to sit here and speculate. I have no clue, and that's my point. I just intuitively sense that there's something. It's amazing that we don't have a global space to figure this out. It's incredible.
My sense of the motivations are simple, dumb momentum.
You think so?
There's a set of institutions that need conflict and war at regular intervals, and there's no reason for them to stop their algorithm until they're forced to stop. So like COVID, no COVID, worldwide lockdowns, no worldwide lockdowns, there's still a set of vested interests like carried on from the Cold War to keep a certain amount of conflict brewing at all times. That's my intuition of it.
Interesting.
That's like, this was on the schedule 5 years ago anyway.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what you have to do is look at, the lens that I found useful to look at this is, like, for example, that the World Economic Forum, the idea that there's a conspiracy to subjugate the global population with digital IDs and vaccine passports. That idea, I think, is in a similar situation where I don't know where to begin to try to objectively, I don't know who to trust. We're not living in a time anymore where evidence is published and then that conclusively decides anything. It's only what narrative has become most dominant in the mimetic environment. And so it's like you have to look at that. I think the most interesting way to look at it is as a myth. a myth that may or may not correspond to reality, but that's not the important part. The important part is like, in this narrative war, myths are the moving pieces, and they are the things that cause things to happen and cause them to be true in some sense. Because, like, let's say that the World Economic Forum, digital ID, global government thing, let's say that was something that was cooked up by Alex Jones and is completely bullshit. Let's say it started off that way.
Okay.
And then let's say that it becomes popular. If the narrative evolves in such a way that the majority of people start to think that that's true, and they start to think that it's a good thing, then it will become a real thing. Because the seed that was just like fantasy became reality by convincing people. So I think narratives are driving the evolution, and you can't, like, conspiracy theories have a way of creating their own, they have a way of coming true if they're popular.
Yeah.
In both ways, for better and for worse. I think the same thing is true with right now what's going on with like decentralization and decentralization, is that the reality is super, super mixed up and probably way less controlled and way less certain and harder to describe than anyone can really say. But the myth is a lot simpler. The myth is much more oriented around humans' storytelling, desires for storytelling and desires for sense making, and like this need we have to have a narrative. And so, yeah, World War III is just like, I mean, really, when are myths made? Myths are made in wars. In one case, I mean, I don't know what other context myths come to being. Some type of hero's journey, typically, like a hero's journey or a creation time or a great cataclysm. I don't think myths usually just pop up in times of peace and stability.
Well, times of peace and stability are the moments of breathing where you get to look back on what just happened and then tell the story about it.
Yeah.
So the peace is necessary.
It's like they're like
the myth making.
They're like the children
process.
of myths, kind of. Like, I don't know do you think people like in the 1950s, when they were living in that, what we see as like, or many people see as like the Halley Khan days when America was at the top of the world and everything made sense, and Leave It to Beaver, and like this kind of like, that's a cultural myth, but it's only like retrospectively a cultural myth. I don't think the people living there really felt that they were in a golden age. The
people living there were reeling, I think, and just launched into war after war after war until today. I think the Korean War immediately kicked up after World War II.
Isn't that crazy how the Korean War is like the forgotten war? I think it's been called that. Nobody remembers it because they didn't have any appetite to care about it after World War II.
Is Mr. President? Is that what I just heard?
God, you know what's right? I can't listen to this without the innuendo now. I'm just
of
like
threesomes and foursomes.
Exactly.
It's all sex play.
It primed my brain to just like hear everything through the lens of like there's like some kind of secret orgy going on down on the golf course.
One can only hope.
Everything's a code word. It's like he's on the green.
Who's Mr. President in this case?
Exactly.
That they just called for. Is that like who's ever got the scepter gets to be Mr. President?
It's whoever's got the wizard hat. Oh man, I wish that, yes, I feel like, see, this is what, this is metaphorically, yeah, the entire world can't be a golf course. You can't have a kind of reality that is constructed for too long. You have to smash things open. So actually, I don't know. If this is World War III, that makes me happy, because if this is as bad as World War III is, I think it's kind of a really good sign that humans are actually getting somewhere.
I agree. I think evolution happens apace, and enlightenment is conserved and grows. I don't think
Interesting.
nukes will be used on each other again, and I think at most one more nuke ever in human history from now to infinity, unless like new human civilizations that forget and then they have to do nukes on each other to remember again.
It's like the every 10,000 years the humans come together and nuke each other. Yeah.
Like, I think nukes are over because of mutually assured destruction, and so we're forced to more peaceful forms of conflict, and conflict just becomes more peaceful over time. And I think this could be the World War III thing happening right now, and less people are having to die to get through it than ever before. I think now I'm going to what victory looks like. If this is World War III, like, what's victory for the good guys?
Yeah, what does that look like?
And the quickest thing I can think of is the truckers in Canada and a peaceful protest showing up the inability of Trudeau to do anything with them except, like, reveal that he's a fucking monster. So that there's an instinct in me that there's a form of victory that's relevant to the current worldwide narrative happening there right now, where just by sitting and doing nothing, they are illustrating some objective truth about bureaucratic institutions and their need to dissolve as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think the victory is, to me, that truckers' protest feels like it's kind of the opening shot in a kind of, it might be like the turning of the tide. It could be a pivotal point, but I feel like victory, if this is World War III, I think victory would have to come with some kind of redemption, in a sense where polarization, the arc of polarization gets turned around. Like, there would have to be some kind of integration or the formation of a new unified child of the current conflict.
Yeah, I think it's a third new point that gets articulated. Of, like, the new vision of the individual. That, like, you can be left and politically and still be this third new thing. You can be right and still be this third new thing. And it's this third new thing that we often move to get over our polarization.
Yeah, that's what victory looks like from my vantage point, is like a kind of escaping this trap where your thoughts are limited and where you have to come down on being come down in between on one side or the other and alienate yourself from a lot of people in order to remain true to yourself. I don't think that is natural or normal, that society should be in a way that people who are aspiring to integrity should have to accept alienation. That's a sign of an unhealthy society, and a society that needs some kind of refreshment. Like, the ideal society, I think the most tolerant society is one in which you have the most social reward for being yourself instead of social penalties for being yourself. And if the social conditions, like, if that, so what that third point is like spaciousness itself, kind of. It's the ability, it's like what we mythologize it must have been like growing up in the 50s and becoming a teenager in the 60s and having just the kind of world where you could just hop in a van and head out somewhere and then just make a life for yourself and everything just fell into place. Like, that kind of spaciousness that was in the post-war years of America is our myth that we think of as the time when opportunity existed. I feel like the internet is going to play a huge role in this. That it's going to have to, internet has to come of age itself. And the internet's kind of been on a sort of a hero's journey in its own right, in a sense, where it sort of started off as this hopeful, naive thing, and then it became, there was the Empire Strikes Back sort of era.
Yeah.
And then now there's like the Return of the Jedi type thing going on with the internet, where there has to be like this arc, and then that'll be the foundational kind of playground environment that humans, this third point myth is gonna use, because if you think about the post-World War II era, like that's really the story of media. It's the story of like television and movies and like film and like and rock and roll bands and the Beatles, and like that's all something that came out of the post-World War II opportunity bubble that bloomed. And like I don't know what it was before that. I don't know what it was. I don't know if there was some kind of, maybe if you want to look at like the 1920s, like the jazz age is some kind of like brief bubble of opportunity that was created by urbanization or something like that, immigration or something like that. But
my personal sense of the different myths and narratives leading into World War II was the birth of the American nation as a decentralized set of states and then getting centralized, and going from just an openly capitalist laissez-faire experiment to a centralized fiat currency, worldwide military police organization thing.
Like becoming imperial, becoming an empire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of optimism about how things are going to go. I just can't get my rocks off to environmental apocalypse very much. It's the same feeling as when I was young and had to go to Sunday school and thought that half my family was going to hell. That's the same feeling as being 15 or 16 and Al Gore Inconvenient Truth came out, and thinking that the world was going to burn for the same reason, because we were sinful and stuff.
I just remember how cool, I just thought that the poster of that movie was super cool, though, how like the Statue of Liberty was like under like a fucking glacier. Like it was like a mile of ice, and like the torch was like sticking out. I was like, that's pretty. It's pretty like it was. I was like, I want to play that video game, you know.
I think you're thinking of a sci-fi disaster movie about global warming called Day After Tomorrow.
Oh shit! Sorry. Okay, that's right. Thank you. Day After Tomorrow, not Inconvenient Truth. That was about the factory that there was like steam smokestack or something on the cover of that one. Yeah, that's right. I got those two mixed up. Whatever. It's the same thing.
But believing in like the hell Christian narrative and then believing in the apocalyptic environmentalism narrative, it was the same sense of like moralistic superiority. And those poor savages who don't believe the new sacred word are gonna burn, and like have to change other people's minds or else. And it was the same sense of like relief and return to health to abandon each of those narratives. And my optimism that things are really gonna be okay is this. It's like an articulation of this animal sense of how my body feels.
Right.
Like, my body can't be convinced for more than a few minutes that things aren't, like, really good.
Have you ever listened to the band Flogging Molly?
Yeah.
There's a song about being, like, on the crew of a pirate ship and being, like, knowing that you're sinners and, like, you're knowing that you're going to hell and like all of like the damnation that awaits you, but like it's sung in like this like, oh well, like cheery kind of way. Until then, and it's like I always thought like that little thing has been for me like how you have to look at the apocalypse. Like I love that attitude of being like not arguing against the fact that yeah, maybe we're damned, but that doesn't define that only defines your life if you really want it to, if you're afraid to live. I think like all apocalypse myths are an excuse of why not to live.
Yeah, they function as an excuse and escape from responsibility.
Certainly in like Christianity world, Bible camp world, that definitely is the case.
Yeah,
it really explains. It's like why you're not allowed to have as much fun as the other kids, and that you should hold yourself on this leash and just like be, satisfied with knowing that you're right. And yeah, it's weird to see. I don't know why humans do that.
Well, is there anything else you want to say about World War III?
I just want to say that I think I share your optimism about it.
Like, I think it's a reasonable optimism. Like, I need to stay awake and active and responsive. Providing that, I'll be okay.
I just think we're heading for a kind of Renaissance type period because I don't think many people really realize how much of a game changer or how close we are to having a truly unstoppable platform for communication and commerce. I don't think it's coming.
The sprouts of a free market, just
a global
coming up through
a global cultural stage that is not subject to the geopolitical momentum of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Basically, like the 21st century's own, the civilization of the mind that was written about by John Perry Barlow in 1996. What he predicted, the kind of like departure from the governments of the 20th century, what he called those wary giants of flesh and steel.
And
those kind of
in that sense, it's not a myth he was creating, but a truth he was perceiving. And truths perceived don't need a myth to go viral for them to be true. They're just going to be revealed as truth the more time that goes on.
Yeah, he was seeing globalism. He saw this vision of globalism, but it was this kind of it was like a humanistic vision of globalism. But all we have so far is this authoritarian, old, tired, authoritarian vision of what globalism looks like. And so like the World Economic Forum myth is like the fear that globalism is going to manifest in a technocratic authoritarian context. But underneath the surface there's this kind of mirror of that, which is almost like the Taoism in China, like the Taoism to China's like in China you have like the Confucianism and the Taoism, which is like the bureaucratic state, and like then you have the the mystical strain of consciousness. I think something like that's happening with globalization right now, with globalism. Not globalization, globalism specifically, like the idea that humans have to synthesize their perspective as a species in some way, and have this kind of like global will to something. I think it's wrong to take a sort of reactionary approach to that and think that that can be stopped, because I don't think it can be stopped. I understand people's appeals for a kind of like sort of some people have like advocated for a kind of like redeemed nationalism or something in response to this globalism, where like like almost like something like Jordan Peterson sort of speaks to a little bit about how like the value of the nation as this like, but hedge against the post-modernization of everything in the globe. That I understand where he's coming from when the only kind of globalism you have to compare your nation against is like the hopeless authoritarian kind of globalism. But I think this globalism is going to manifest on the internet in a much more optimistic way that is going to be consistent with people having their own local communities.
The same way we have a information war maybe with World War III, we're going to have information nations.
I think so.
Where you subscribe yourself to which nation of narrative, and that'll be independent of which national geographic location you're in.
Yeah, we're going to have overlapping digital virtual nations.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I mean, nations are already virtual. They just happen to correlate with geographical areas, but yeah.
I think Chico is a really important place, like in terms of schools needing to be these hot spots of weirdness, that like just do away with a lot of the mental weights, existential weight on a human mind, because there's just too much weird idiosyncratic stuff happening instead. I think Chico is one of those pockets of like, it's more a university of life than other liberal modern communities are. The focus here is more on nature and on the people in front of you than on the narrative quest you need to signal to everyone that you're on.
Well, there's also a lot of actual just art in the city too that's actively being made.
And it's places like that have a little more spaciousness, that are able to generate new ideas.
Yeah.
And places that are more hegemonic, like new tech liberal SF, it's just harder to generate new ideas that could save civilization there, because it's harder to think there, because you have to subscribe to this ever-growing constitution of arbitrary beliefs to even like exist. So it's harder to generate the necessary new ideas, the necessary new technologies that are going to get us to that new third point of human identification.
Are you saying it's not the metaverse?
No, the metaverse seems to be purely just a gross scarecrow joke of what to avoid.
The other night I thought about how I would describe metaverse. It's like if you want to
It's just this punching bag.
It's being in a. It's like a world where you can be in a Zoom meeting forever. It's like I read this thing about how I read this headline about how in the metaverse, and I mean like Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse, they instituted a. Like, so you're walking around in like VR, right? You're walking around in this little like world where like the birds are like emojis and stuff like that.
I hate this so much already.
It's fucking awful, but it's like, and like everyone's like smiling and like.
It just like I felt like a little bit of my soul just like fell away.
But apparently they in a darkly poetic move, Meta instituted a 4-foot limit of how close you can get to other people in this virtual space to avoid sexual harassment. Because they were doing a thing where like in their like beta version or whatever, like people are doing like the thing that every teenage boy who's ever played a first-person shooter game has done.
Yeah.
Which is where you go up to the person and you like pretend to like hump them or something, like poning or whatever the fuck it is. Like, I don't know if it's changed, but when I played Call of Duty, you know what I mean? You would.
Yeah, in Halo, you teabag.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the most just adolescent just fucking thing, right? But apparently, I just thought it was so darkly poetic that one of the very first moves in governing the metaverse was to limit how close people could get to each other. Just from the outset, I'm like, that is not a good sign that this is the answer to our crisis of belonging and the loneliness. It's like just walking around in a virtual space where you just can't get that close to people. You can't touch anyone. It's for safety reasons, because we're so terrified that our, fake avatars are going to harass each other that we just can't allow ourselves any human contact. It's almost like a parody of itself.
Yeah, it was from the get-go.
It was from the very beginning.
Zuckerberg's been a caricature, a parody of himself since that first Congress video.
I think that that Zuckerberg is going to end up being the scapegoat for the centralized internet in a sort of like a Rene Girard kind of sense, like how Rene Girard, the dude Peter Thiel riffs on about how like the society always needs a scapegoat to move past some kind of like dilemma, some sort of impasse. And when society is at an impasse, you find a scapegoat to be like the fall guy for, on the back of that fall guy, there's like this blood sacrifice, and then you synthesize a new sort of like thing.
Well, certainly metaverse as a concept is that already, whether or not Zuckerberg himself becomes that too. Like, I've only seen the metaverse get talked about in derogatory terms.
Yeah, I've never once seen someone like excited about it, which is pretty remarkable. Yeah, that's why I don't think you can really compare metaverse hype and blockchain hype, because there's a lot of true believers in blockchain, and there's a lot of bullshit too, but it's sort of like the bullshit is something that is,
The bullshit will come and go. People who are actually doing something true will be there through it all.
There was like never a point at which the metaverse was not a thing that was being pushed by the biggest social network in the world.
That's right.
So it's a little bit of a different thing, but language is the real metaverse. We've been in the metaverse since language was invented.
I think, if I'm being honest, what I really want out of victory from World War III is alien contact.
That's unexpected.
Whether it's a sentient race of artificial intelligence guys we discover inside the internet, like the new Tron movie by Disney, or whether it's a literal, like, from another planet race of people that we start talking to. It's less interesting to contemplate some like new generation of mutant humans, like X-Men style contact. That's less exciting.
Yeah.
Like outside new awareness to talk with, to make us aware that we're inside of a very rarefied, specific kind of consciousness. That, if I'm being honest, that's what I hope for.
Yeah.
Maybe that's carryover from a Christian upbringing of just wanting Christ to return and wipe the board clean.
Like being visited by angels and stuff is very like UFO kind of shit.
It is, yeah.
I mean, Terrence McKenna talked about that a lot. How he drew those parallels between religion and ufology.
Oh, did I tell you the UFOs I saw a couple weeks ago?
No.
I was in our neighborhood, so I called you about it, and I couldn't get a hold of you. But I saw this group of like 5 or 6 or 7 things pretending to be stars, really low in the sky, just like a little bit too early in the evening to be that bright, and moving slow enough that if you just like had them in your peripherals, they would register as stars. But if you looked at them, you could see that they were all very slowly drifting in formation.
Maybe they were drones.
They were going really slow. Like, they could pass as literal stars if they stayed in your peripherals.
Wow.
And didn't get focused on.
And they were in formation, huh?
In formation to look like a random constellation. And then, like, I could tell that they were burning out very, very slowly. And then they did very, very slowly until there was only like one left, and then it faded out of being visible. But it was like a burning out feeling, like the way like seeing a shooting star, like seeing it exist is also knowing that it's burning out. Like I could feel them burning out as I watched them, just like over 2 to 5 minutes.
Oh, really?
Or like 5 minutes,
so
really.
They were getting dimmer, kind of?
But so slow that it was an intuition.
Okay, yeah.
And then they literally did dim out.
That's wild. Yeah, I hope aliens are real. I don't know why I do. I think that would be an immediate point of unity for humans if that was true. Even the imagination of aliens is, in some sense, a point of unity for humans, because it makes us realize maybe our consciousness is sort of pretty specific, which could be unifying for people who think we're vastly different from each other.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We'll get there to like a unified narrative of what it is to be a native of the Earth. We'll get there like by necessity or by an outside force, like kicking up the anthill.
Dude, in the next podcast, we should do like 10-year predictions of the world. I want to do like predictions, like, or like 2030 predictions. Like,
yeah, that'd be fun.
Because I feel like we talk a lot about what's going to happen, but it'd be fun to like...
stake some claims.
Just be like,
and have them on tape.
Like by 2030, we're going to have a global, instantaneous, zero-fee, uncensorable cryptocurrency. Yes or no? I would vote yes.
Well, yeah, that one's obvious.
I want to make the claim, and I want this video to be evidence of the fact that I predicted it. Not the only one who thinks that, but 5 years ago, that would be completely...
Those kinds of things are proved inevitable by just, like, when government tries to get in their way, it just makes them stronger.
Yeah, you know, with that whole...
that's how you know it's coming true, is it tries to be made illegal, and that just is a galvanizing thing for it to grow stronger.
Yeah, you know, Canada is, like, freezing the bank accounts of people without a court order for being associated with the protest.
Yeah.
The truckers thing.
Yeah, it's complete fucking communism.
That's like, I mean, I think it's actually really, really good that is being talked about, because, like, you realize that, like, your money is just on an Excel spreadsheet that is one bureaucrat's decision away from just not existing.
Yeah.
That's a pretty fragile situation. You can't have the money infrastructure of the world is so critical to having any kind of like free society.
It just creates the best pitch in the world for
really does.
Cryptocurrencies.
That's how you know that this conspiracy isn't going to get very far, because if they were really trying to win, they wouldn't have done a thing that would maybe block a few $1,000s from getting somewhere and then simultaneously like wake up millions of people who are now going to go, okay, so now I believe in the cryptocurrency thing.
Well, this is the main debunking idea of conspiracy theories, is the evil actors of every given conspiracy theory are much more often big institutions of blind momentum that aren't actually thinking. They're these unthinking, cancerous, just algorithm turners that don't know how to react intelligently to the ongoing situation. Like
with maybe some grifters embedded in them that are doing their own little personal agendas.
Like a poetic metaphor of this is every clickbait headline gleefully pointing out Trudeau's inability to do anything in the ongoing situation except call everyone a Nazi. Jewish parliament members included. He can't think of anything to do except keep accusing people of Nazis.
It's like,
being Nazi.
Hey, World War II called it once it's bad guy back. It's like what is this, fucking Indiana Jones? Where all the bad guys, it's always Nazis.
Yeah.
He like finally gets into like a secret room. He's like, Nazis! God damn it, these guys! Sean Connery's like, I told you.
Always Nazis.
Yeah. He's like, Junior, there are Nazis everywhere. It's like, dude, God, be more original. Be more original. Like
he can't, because he can't think. Because he got there by his inability to think and his ability to parrot narratives. And that's how every bad actor and bad group of these conspiracy theories is actually working, is they're just reaching for the next convenient thing.
Yeah, they're not very prepared.
No, and they're
it's like you showed up without doing any of your homework,
yes.
And so you just choose a name out of the hat or something. Yeah,
that's my intuition about these like nefarious groups of evil actors, usually envisioned as old white men in a wood-paneled room, planning some evil thing.
So, good. Optimism, then. Optimism. That's the theme. All right.
Okay.